Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. Today we're diving into the Django REST Framework, a powerful tool for building APIs in Python. If you've ever wanted to connect your Django backend to mobile apps, JavaScript frontends like React, or even third-party tools, this is your first step. Now let's build our first API together. So moving forward, let's talk about what the Django REST Framework is, which is a type of a REST API. So the Django REST Framework, or DRF, is a library that makes it easier to build RESTful APIs in the Django. It also allows us to expose our database models as JSON endpoints that clients like mobile apps or front-end JavaScript can interact with. So there are certain things we'll be needing to achieve what we want to do today. Things like the Django itself, the Django REST Framework, serializers, and view sets. So the goal of this video is to help beginners understand what the Django REST Framework is, what it's used for, and how to set up their first simple API step by step. Hello everyone, welcome back. We're going to be building a real-world REST API using the Django REST Framework. Our API will take a city name and then return the current weather in that city using live data from the OpenWeather API. So if you're just starting with DRF or want to see it in action with a fun project, this is one for you. So let's get into it. Now we're going to create our main Django project folder, right? I will cd into it now, which is weather API. I want to write it correctly, and then inside it I'm going to create my app using the python space manage.py start app, then the name of my app. Right, so we would open this file in VS Code and then show us how we are able to use the manage.py file. So if I open this now, you can see that right there on the right hand side there's a manage.py file, which is the main file for executing any form of command in the Django. So I'm going to open up my terminal to run some code. So in my terminal here, I want to install some dependencies that we'll be using, which is the Django REST Framework and requests. So it's possibly going to show a requirement already satisfied for me because I have used this several times. I even have it installed globally and not just on the projects individually. Right, so yes, now I would go and do the first thing you need to do anytime you're working with the Django. After creating an app, go into your settings.py, register your app, and then first I want to register REST Framework. So after that, we'll come down and register the name of our app, which is called core. So with that done, we're going to go straight into creating serializers. We already looked at what serializers are at the beginning. So we're going to go straight into creating a serializer for the weather API. So I'll come here, right click and create a new file, and I'll call that serializers.py. We've successfully created the file, and in there I'm going to say from REST Framework we want to import serializers, and then that's the only thing we're going to be importing in this case here. And then we'll go ahead and say class. I like to name whatever I want to do attached to serializer. So say weather serializer, open a normal bracket and say serializers.serializer, and then go inside to define what I need to be returned. So I just want the city in this case, so I will take out this other part because with OpenWeather API this returns as a JSON file to us directly with just applying the city name, just the city name. So we want just the city name in this case. So we'll go ahead to create a view for this serializer that we have created. That will serve as the weather API view that we can use to call out things and pass in data that we want. So in here I'll say I want first of all import requests, so because we're going to be using this to fetch data, and from REST underscore framework dot views I want to import API view. API view, and then next is let's import the response from REST framework dot response. Let's import response, and from REST framework let's import status, and lastly we want to import the serializer, whether serializer from the serializers that we created. So we have an issue here because we're saying import, so let's change the first one, so it's from REST framework dot views, let's import API dot view. Okay, so we change the first one. Okay, so now we want to come down and define the view for this. So I'll say class whether API view. Denote that the first letter of all our views has to be like a capital letter. Okay, so I'm installing my OpenWeather API key here. I'm going to go and fetch it later on, but I just want to put it as a placeholder. Then when I get it, I'm going to replace it. So we'll say class weather API. Say class weather API. Yes. So I am using a bit of AI. I integrated GitHub Copilot into my coding, like my VS Code per se, so it gives me a lot of predictions and makes my coding faster. So these are ways that you can implement AI into your work, or making work smarter for you. So I want to make a self and request, a post request, and then say serializer is equals to weather serializer. Inside there I want to say data is equals to request.data, right? That's the data that we are requesting for. That's what we want to return as the data. Now, so say if serializer dot is valid, as if the serializer is valid, we want to check the city name that was put in and check if it is validated. So I'll come down and then see city is equals to serializer dot validated underscore data. So the reason why I'm even typing it out is because I want us to fully break it down. You can see how I get auto predictions, and once you know what you're doing, you can follow along, grab your predictions from Copilot, because what it's doing is predicting your next steps, what you're trying to do. All these things are basic form of writing codes, right? So we want to see how we can keep on doing what we're doing without having to stress our head, work smarter. That's the reason why I'm trying to inculcate, like, you guys implementing GitHub Copilot here. So I want to get the URL from where I'm going to get my response, which is the open data URL fetching the response from. So if the response of status code is equals to 200, that means it is good, we have no errors. Then we should return the data equals to response.json, right? And then we want to create the weather data that we are expecting. That's the weather data should be the city, the temperature, the description, the humidity. So that means whenever we pass in the city name, these are the details that we will be getting from this weather data here. And then we should get the response if there's anything bad. Else we should get the response if it's good, and then else we should get a response of for not found, or error city not found, when we do not have, or we pass in the wrong city, or maybe something's wrong with our API. And then lastly, I want to add serializer.errors, just in case for any form of error that we would have, right, or bad requests being made. So moving on, after creating our views, we need to create our URL for our app, and then we then create our URL. So we already have our URLs for our main project folder, which is weather API. So in here I'm just going to come here and say from the Django there's URLs, we want to import paths, because paths is how we used to define our URL paths. And then from our views, I want to import weather API view. That's the view we created in our views.py file, right? And then moving forward, we want to, okay, sorry about that. Yes, weather API view. I want to define the URL patterns that we want. So in this case, we're just going to be defining one URL pattern. So I'm going to autocomplete and then take out this API underscore, because I want just weather as name in my URL. So I'm going to go to my main root directory project folder, which is the weather API in the URLs everywhere, and register our app URLs. So the Django is so interesting that if you have multiple apps, all you just need to do is register those multiple apps in the settings.py, and then register those multiple apps URLs in your main root URL. That's all, and everything works fine, no cuts, corners. Django is amazing, man. Alright, so we have that. Now the next thing we need to do is to test the API. So with DRF, we don't need to use Postman or Core to like test our API to see if it's running, right? Once we run our saver, we can be able to get our Django REST Framework UI UX platform that gives us the ability to be able to test our API links if it's working. So but before we do that, let's go into OpenWeatherMap and get our API keys. So I'm going to show you how to get your API keys, and then how to pass our API key into where we store as a placeholder for the API key, right? And then test our API and see if it works, basically. Okay, so we'll go into the OpenWeather API. First thing you need to do is to sign up or sign in if you already have an account. I'm going to be signing in. I'm just going to quickly pass in my data. I think I forgot, so I just quickly had to sign in. So we'll sign in now, and then clear this. I'll take this out. I don't want to put this cancel. Now let's go to API. So when you click on API, you can just see documentation basically for you to come and read and see how it works, what this does, what that does. But to create our API keys that we'll be needing to access any form of URLs that we are getting, because from here now is where we will get the URL that we will place to pass API key into. So if you scroll down a bit, you can see the URL is right there, how to make an API call. So this is how to make the API call. In our code, you will clearly see it there that we are making an API call also too. So we need to grab an API key that we can use to make this call. So I'm going to create a code, a API key here. So I'll just call it weather_API. So yes, my API has been created. So do well to always verify your account with OpenWeatherMap, because when you do, it can give you an issue with your, if you don't, it can give you an issue with your API key. So for example, you didn't confirm your email, or you didn't do the email confirmation of your account, and then you're now trying to use your OpenWeather API here, it wouldn't work. Trust me out, it wouldn't work, because that same thing we're going to see right here too. So I made a mistake saying REST framework when we were installing our apps into our settings.py. So I need to go to my settings.py and then pass in the REST_framework. Okay, so that's REST_framework now, and then now it's working fine. So I just need to copy this URL here and then pass in the URL names to the app and the root directory project folder that we have, which is I think API/weather. So just copy that, come to my browser here, and then I'll pass it API/weather. So boom, I have my. So let me show you how we got API/weather. So inside here we called it API for the first one as name of the URL, and then we called it weather. So basically, so that's how we call it. It said API/weather. So we'll click on enter and have that run. So now you see this is the Django REST Framework user interface for testing out your APIs. So we don't have to go use Postman or Core. We just have to test our APIs here and use the framework. So I'm going to pass in the content, say City of Lagos, and say City not fine. So this is the error that I was talking about. If you don't get to validate your account, you're going to have this error. So you just need to do is make sure that you validate your account. So I'm going to validate my account and then try it out again. So I was trying to test out a lot of things here to see where the error was coming from, but this is neither any of the error. The main thing was I forgot to validate my account. So basically I validated my account, and then I'm going to test it out again. Let's try City for Lagos, and then move this from here to there. Okay, now we say the City of Lagos. When you post, I have this as my results, basically. Voila. So the Django is very interesting, API is very interesting.